Um, let's see, quick overview. The whole video is just a list of common mistakes that people make using Unity. So I've got a giant list here, and you'll probably see it on the screen when I go through. I've got it in text in the code too, just so I have a little bit of a script to go off of. And then I'm going to start with one example. So I'll give the problem, the example, and show how to fix it, and then just kind of start talking about them, and then we can mix stuff in. I just didn't have any really good visual examples I could throw together for it, so figured I'd start with this. All right, I guess we'll get started. Hey, what's up? Jason here from Unity3D.College. Today, we're going to go over some common issues that I see people... No, what do I want to say? I want to say some of the most common mistakes see new developers or experienced programmers make when they get into Unity. Cool, got it. Hey, what's up? Jason here from Unity3D.College. Today, we're going to talk about... What was that? More noises. I'm just going to write this down so I remember. And I'll read it off here. Cool. Okay, that's what I'm going to go off of. So I'll do that, and then we'll go, bam, cut into maybe the intro, and then go into the first problem. I think that'll work. I'll try it. I'll record it now and see. Take a drink. Hey, what's up? Jason here from Unity3D.College. Today we're going to talk about common mistakes that developers make when they're getting started with Unity. Now, I've seen these mistakes made by new programmers and even advanced, experienced developers who are working on web apps or business apps. So, let me just do that whole thing one more time. Hey, what's up? Jason here from Unity3D.College. Today we're going to talk about common mistakes. Let's start that over. One more time. I assume you need me to clap in between each one. All right, let's go again. Hey, what's up? That was way too squeaky. Try one. Hey there, Jason here from Unity3D.College. Today we're going to talk about common mistakes that developers make when they get started with Unity. Now, I've seen these mistakes made by new programmers who are just learning, or even experienced programmers who are common. Damn it. I said common. I meant familiar with. I'll try one more time. Hey, what's up? Jason here from Unity. This again. Hey there, Jason here from Unity3D.College. Today we're going to talk about common mistakes that developers make when they're getting started with Unity. Now, I've seen these mistakes made by new programmers who are just getting started and experienced developers who work in web projects or enterprise things and just know what they're doing, but they're just a little bit new to Unity. So, I don't know what to say after that. Just cut there and we'll go. So, let's get started. Or you could cut that in there somehow. And then maybe roll to intro, and then we'll go into the actual issues. And obviously don't show the code during the intro talky part, but I don't know why I even told you that. Cool. Well, I'm gonna move this out of the way real quick. I'll do another clap right before we start on the other part, which should be just a second. Actually, wait. I think I'm gonna start with code up because I want to have my notes here, and then we'll flip to the screen. Then when I flip to the screen, maybe start showing the actual screen. String names, no, not using. All right, so we're gonna start off with a just a quick one on not using the editor. This will be the one that actually shows editor stuff. So I'll get these set up side by side. I set up my boat here. And how do I want to get this out of there? So I'm just gonna make this a prefab. Move it down. Yep. Oh wait, no, I don't want to do that. I'm gonna save this as a different scene. Then we'll go back into demo 01 and I'll just update it. And then we'll start. Shit. Hold on, I gotta go into 2. Just gonna do that and save. Okay. Cool. So we're gonna start with the animation example. So, all right, and we'll go from here. The first thing I see people really struggle with, and I see this a lot, is not using the editor properly or just trying to code too much. A very common example I've seen is just trying to script movement in your code. So here I just wanted to demonstrate this and then show you a proper way to set something like this up. But I've got a boat here in a little low poly city, which looks awesome, I think. And then I want to move this boat. Say I'm setting something up where the boat's just going to move along, maybe back and forth. Perhaps it's an idle thing, maybe a little intro tutorial thing, or whatever it is. Some simple animation or movement that's not supposed to change. Now, a common way I've seen people try to do this, because they come from a very strict programming background, they're not used to an editor like this, is they'll go in and they'll create a script and then set up some positions. So we'll have element 0, which is just the first element in my array, give it an XYZ position, and maybe I want to add in a fourth one, and I just move this thing over here and then figure out what that value is and start copying it in. Now, I see this kind of stuff all the time, and it's not always this exact example, but there are some really easy ways around this stuff. So let's look at what the code would be here. Now, obviously, don't show that code. Let's do a little cut here and just go straight into this code, like a fade or something. And see if I can keep my dog. Hold on. He's going to start kicking and pushing my lights around. Okay. All right, cool. So then just fading into the code. So here, maybe we'd set it up like this with an array of positions, a next position, and then a distance check to see if we've gotten close enough. And then we'll turn and look at the right position and then move forward a little bit. Now, of course, we may come up with a more advanced example than this, and in a real project or a new developer is probably going to come up with something even more complicated than this. And if I hit play, you'll see that we're going to start running into issues. Let's watch. So I hit play. Oh, look, my boat's going sideways because the forward direction is actually up on this boat. So I'd have to reparent it, and now it's acting weird and freaking out. You get the idea, though. The whole problem here is that I'm trying to... I don't like this part. I want to reshoot this part. Let's go back into... Yeah, let's just restart that part from the top. Just gonna reshoot it. This is the problem with not stopping and pausing. Hopefully it's good, but I'll just have to note here that I restarted. Restarting part 10, or part 1, 10 minutes in. Okay, cool. I just wanted to note what I was doing there, though. Okay, so we'll start again and go. Now, the first problem I see new developers struggle with, or especially experienced developers who have a slightly different background struggle with, is not taking advantage of all of the things that are in the editor, not using the editor properly, and instead trying to code features that already exist. So say, for example, I've got a boat here, this little red boat, and I just want it to sail around a little bit. Perhaps it's just like an idle thing where the boat's going back and forth, maybe even a tutorial or some kind of a script where the boat needs to go from one place to another, turn, do a little bit of stuff like that. What I usually see people do, starting with, is just start writing code. So they'll create a script, a tutorial boat script, for example, give it an array of positions, keep track of the next position in an integer so we know exactly what position we want to go to, then write an update loop that maybe checks the distance to that position, increments it if we've reached the position, and then looks at where we want to go and slowly moves us forward with transform.translate, maybe multiplied by speed and delta time because we want it to be frame rate independent and controllable. But you get the idea. This is what I see a lot of the time. And in fact, to be honest, it's the same kind of thing that I did when I started. I built an entire tutorial system doing stuff like this to move my things around. Now, I did it a little bit more advanced than that, but you get the idea. I still did it all in code, and it was a really bad idea because there are some much, much better options. Now, for something like this, let's hit play first and just watch what happens. I'm going to hit play and watch my boat. Oh, look, it flipped sideways. It's acting weird, and now it's just shaking back and forth. It didn't even really do my turn like it was supposed to. So you get the idea. It's not perfect, and I need to do a bit of work to kind of clean this up. Now, the reason it's flipping over, by the way, is that the forward axis is up and down. That's that blue arrow, so when I rotate it and use that look at or look towards, it's pointing that forward direction there. So I'd have to parent this to another object. Whole big mess. There's an easy alternative, though. If I open up my second demo scene here, you can see that instead of setting up a boat with a script like this, I can set up an animation. So here I've just created a boat with an animator on it and an animation, and I can hit play, and it'll kind of sail around and go back and forth and actually work. Now, it's not beautiful because my animation skills aren't that great, and I didn't spend that much time on it, but it's a whole lot easier to set up and a whole lot easier to edit. Now, if you wanted to do this yourself, you could just select a boat. Here, let's go through that process real quick. Let's select this boat. We'll remove that script. And then we just go to the animation window and hit create and create a new animation. I'll call this boat 2. And then we'd enable our boat first, hit the record button, and be in the movement mode, which is just W on the keyboard or right here. Then maybe move it a little bit, get a first keyframe. Then I select a point on this animation timeline. Now I use the mouse wheel to zoom out, and this is in seconds. So that's 1 second, 2 seconds, 3 seconds. I go to like 1 second, drag it over here. Bam, go to 2 seconds, drag it over here. Oh, yeah, drag it over here. And then maybe go to 3 seconds and drag it over here and even rotate it, whatever this direction. You notice that the rotation's getting added. I could even maybe scale it up so it rotates and scales. Then I can stop recording, hit play, and watch my entire animation just kind of go. Look at that. Our boat's going, slowly growing as it animates. And I didn't have to write any code. I don't have to mark down any positions. It just kind of works. Now, this kind of thing works for UI elements, game objects, obviously, tutorial stuff. But there's a whole lot of other things like this that you can run into. So let's talk about some other ones. And then we'll cut and go into some of the other common things. What were they? Actually, let's just replace the end there. So instead of saying, let's look at some other things, I'm going to say, but let's go on to some other issues instead. Now, there are a lot of things like this, but let's go on to some other, I did that wrong. Now, there are a lot of things like this. So if you find yourself coding up a system, first, just do a quick check. Make sure that the thing doesn't already exist and that there isn't a better, easier to use solution already available for you. Now, let's go on to some other issues that I see people run into. Cool. And then we'll do a cut or fade. And let me just look at my code notes here. What's the next thing we want to talk about? And here I don't really have anything to show, so I'll probably just leave this on the screen and then just mix in whatever, anything random that makes sense, or just me talking. Let's see. So not using the editor, string name lookups. Oh, actually, you know what? Let's talk about the audio mixer for 1 second. Oh, no, yeah, I'm gonna do that. So scratch that last thing I said. We'll look at another thing, and that other thing will be the audio mixer. So we'll do a cut. And we'll go to here, because I don't think I did the audio mixer in the other one. Okay, cool. Another thing I see people struggle with is setting up audio levels and audio mixing systems. I've seen a lot of people build these not knowing that there's already an audio mixer built right into the engine. So if you want to do some leveling or attenuation or just muting channels, adjusting channels based on different things, check out the audio mixer and definitely use it. But just, again, remember, there are a lot of these built-in systems that are there to cover all of the really common things. So if it's something that you think is common in a video game, there's probably a system in there that you should check out and learn about before you try to build your own. Now let's go on to some non-editor stuff. Okay, cool. And now we're going to cut. And we're going to go into here. What's this? That was at about 16 minutes. I'm just going to mark it. Just trying to keep notes here so I can send those to you. Done. Okay, cool. We're gonna go with don't overuse mono behaviors, blah blah blah. Okay, cool. And starting now. So one of the most common, again, I don't want to say so. One of the most common issues I see for new developers in Unity is overuse of mono behaviors. When you create a script in Unity, it by default makes a mono behavior. So you right click, hit create new C# script, you're getting a mono behavior, but you don't necessarily need one for everything. In fact, you probably don't need one for most things. It's just that the way that the engine works and the way the workflow is, it kind of leads you in that direction. So you need to watch out for that and just try to minimize what things are mono behaviors and only make things that really need to be a mono behavior actually be one. Now, if you're coming from a programming system, or cut it to now. Now, if you're coming from web development or business development, you may be familiar with something like MVC. And if you are, just think of the mono behavior as a view that's just pretty interactive. It may have some pretty good code in there to keep it interactive, but generally it should be somewhat like a view. Now, don't try to force yourself into that though. So if you have a mono behavior and you need it to be a controller, it's controlling some stuff, totally fine. Just start thinking about actually separating out your code, even if the logic stuff is all happening in a mono behavior or in multiple mono behaviors. At least separate the things out so that you have the ones that act like a view and the ones that act like controllers. But don't go overboard, and obviously don't overcomplicate your project. If you're building something simple like a Flappy Bird clone, don't worry about it at all. It's not a big deal. This is more important when you're getting into real bigger projects. And cut. And we'll go to the next one, which is going to be prefabs here. Another thing I see really common, try that again. Another thing that's really common with business developers and web developers is trying to avoid prefabs or just not taking full advantage of them. Now, prefabs are a game object that's kind of all set up in the editor. If you're not familiar with them, you definitely should be. But what I see people do wrong is start to build these things in code. So instead of using a prefab, they'll create a game object completely in code, adding each component one at a time, setting all of the values, where really the prefab is there to make that not need to happen, I guess. It's let's try this again. I feel like I'm struggling through it. We'll redo prefabs. Here, let's just do a cut. What are we at now? Cool. I'm gonna restart the prefab thing. Another common mistake I see developers who come from a web or business background make is ignoring or underusing prefabs. They tend to build their own game objects and set everything up in code instead of predefining these prefabs, which is pretty much what they're there for, and using them. Now, if it feels weird because it's not in code, you have to think of it a bit like a dependency injection system. These prefabs are the packaged up objects that have all of the dependencies ready to go, and you're just injecting them into your game at the right time by instantiating them. Of course, it's not exactly like dependency injection, but it's pretty close when it comes to a Unity context. So make sure that you're taking full advantage of these prefabs, and especially with the new prefab systems in 2018.3, we've got prefab variants and prefab hierarchies or nested prefabs. So definitely go check those out. If you haven't seen the videos, I'll have them linked below so you can go learn all about those and see how much they can really help with your project. Cool. That's the end of that part, and I just gotta remember to put the link in there, and then I can put like the little call out link or something too. Let's see. Next up, I think I want to go to this stuff, the lookup stuff, and then because it ties into optimizing, so I'm going to talk about that one next. In fact, I'm going to copy these 3 lines of code, and I'm going to make another method here. And we'll just use this. So now you can just kind of like cut to the screen. Oh, let me. So I've got my notes there. It's fine, I think, show the screen and show the code here, because then it'll make more sense. All right, cool. And we'll cut in. Now, something I see everybody do wrong. Let's cut that. I don't like that. Now, one mistake that I find is common across everybody is using the game object find options that are string based. So you can see I've got an example here with ship equals game object dot find with tag, and here people get tags, they learn about tags, and they start using tags to find all of their objects. It kind of works, but it is kind of a slow process, and it has another really bad side effect that it's hard to discover, and it's hard to know when something's broken. So I can have my code just like this. Somebody can go in and make a change to the ship, maybe recreate the ship and forget to tag it as a ship, and the game will stop working, but I don't get any compiler errors. I don't get any real notification that something is wrong. That's probably the biggest reason that I don't like it, on top of the fact that it's just a little bit slower to find with tag instead of caching these things and using find object of type. Now, the GameObject.find call is the same, but even worse, because here we're looking at the GameObject's actual name, and GameObject names can change all the time. Somebody renames a prefab, that instantiated object name might change. Somebody has some code that adds a little bit of debug info, the object name changes. Somebody just renames the object, it changes, and everything breaks again. And the problem here is, again, you don't get compiler notifications. You just sit there wondering what's wrong. You have to debug, and you're wasting time. I mean, a simple little thing like a tag missing could end up, maybe taking you 5 minutes. It could end up taking somebody 4 hours or 2 days to try to figure it out before they finally realize, oh, it was a stupid tag, somehow it got removed, I don't know what happened. Now, when we go on to talking about tags, camera.main is the biggest offender, and a lot of people have actually run into this issue, and it's the same issue as with the ship, it's just even more hidden. So camera.main calls camera for, GameObject.find with tag, and it uses that main camera tag. That's why when you create a new scene, it has that main camera tag on it. So if you add a new camera, delete that old one, you may have noticed, hey, the project stopped working. What's going on? I can't see anything. Or I'm getting errors on all these camera.main calls. It's because it's using that tag underneath, and it's, I'd say, hidden and secret, although it's a pretty well-known secret. if you're getting into Unity or just kind of new with it, it's very easy to make that mistake. In fact, I've made it a million times, and I still do it sometimes in my projects. And here, you can even see in Rider, it's giving me a warning that, hey, camera.main may end up being null. Let's cut that in part. Cut the part about Rider. So, yep, don't use, yeah, let's cut that too. Whatever, just cut wherever it fucking made sense. I just didn't want to say the part about Rider because it didn't really make much sense. Okay, next up, optimizing. That's what I'm going to go into next. And in this one, we can show the profiler window maybe just running, and while I talk about it or something. I don't know. Cool. All right, and we'll go from here. Now, when we talk about performance, it's really important that you remember to profile, and remember that you can profile. Profiling used to be a pro-only feature, but it's available in all versions of Unity right now, and it makes a big... I'm going to start that over. I think I need to get a drink. Okay, try again. Now, it doesn't make sense to talk about performance and slow things without talking about profiling. A lot of the time I see people start to guess what's wrong with their code. They'll see a low frame rate and they'll think, oh, maybe it's that thing. Maybe it's these models or this one little plugin that I pulled in or this code. Without actually looking at data, you're just making guesses and probably just wasting your time. If you don't have a lot of Unity experience, you're almost definitely wasting your time because there are slightly different things that tend to break Unity specifically. Yeah. Let's try that again. Okay, restarting profiling again for like the third time at 27:20. Okay. Oh, let me get that off the screen. Yeah, go ahead. Now, it doesn't make sense to talk about performance issues without talking about profiling. The profiler used to be a pro-only feature back in the Unity 4 and 5 days, but now it's free for everybody, and you should definitely take advantage of it. If you're going in there and just kind of guessing what you think is slow, you're probably going to be wrong. And if you're coming from a standard programming experience, you're probably really not going to know what to look for. Generally, things that cause big issues are just slow running code that's in an update loop, probably a #1 cause. Things like debug.log calls in an update loop are actually really terrible. So when you're profiling, make sure that you're watching for those and disabling those when you really want to get a speed number there or a frame rate. And also make sure that you do a build to your actual device when you want to get your real frame rate. So back to the profiler though. Some other things you can do are look for garbage collector allocations and garbage collector calls. You might not see it in here because we're really not doing anything, but a lot of the time with a project, you'll see big giant spikes and freezing or hitching. Now in a web app or a Windows app, you might be able to hide that and mask it and it might not be a big deal. But in a game, when your game freezes up for half a second, it's huge. It makes a big noticeable difference and it feels like there's something wrong. If it freezes up longer than that, obviously it gets much worse. And if it's a fast-paced game, you pretty much ruin your game just by having bad performance and having those little hitches. Those generally come from generating a bunch of garbage for the C# garbage collector or the CLR garbage collector to collect and clean up. This happens by instantiating a bunch of objects that you don't necessarily need and then destroying them again. That's why in games we generally like to pool things and reuse these objects. So we'll create an object, maybe deactivate it, hide it away, and then bring it back when we need another one of those. Say I've got ships that are destroyable. I'll never actually destroy my ship. I'll just kind of move it off the screen, maybe change an animation or something, and then bring it back to life when I need it. Because creating a new game object generates some garbage. Destroying it just means I have to garbage collect later. So I want to avoid that at all costs. Well, not all costs, but at most costs. Now, I also want to say that that doesn't mean you should never generate any garbage, especially if you're getting started. If you're just starting out with Unity, don't worry too much about it until it starts to become an issue. Now, the reason for that is you don't want to kind of get derailed trying to figure this out while you're also trying to learn everything else. But once you get to the point where you're getting like that big spike that just went by, that means you need to start worrying about this. And you can actually click on this and let's see. Let's take a quick look. If we expand out the player loop here and sort by GC allocation, you can see what's actually generating that garbage. And this 17 bytes may seem small, and it really is. But you got to remember that's per frame. We're running hundreds of frames a second, and this is a lot of bytes, and it'll slowly add up over a couple minutes. And that's why it took a while before we got that big spike. Now, if we were doing a lot more, this could be a lot faster and be an issue. Anyway, when we're talking about performance, just make sure that you profile. Don't guess. Okay, cool. Let's go on to the next one. God, there's a lot of things. I feel like this video is going to be like 3 hours long. That's done. Cinemachine, tutorials, and timeline. So yeah, I think the next part I'm going to talk about Cinemachine, timeline, and Doozy UI. And I figure we'll just throw a random clip of each one of those up there while I talk about them. And I'm just going to kind of jump back to it. Now, before we go any further, I want to talk about some of those other really cool solutions that I like to use in projects and avoid building, just to make sure that you know that they're there too. Some of those include things like, let me try that again. I felt like I said some of those too many times. Try again. Now, before we go any further, I want to bring up a couple of the really cool things that I think you should probably consider mixing into your solution when you start to build out. Now, let's try. Let me try it again. Now, before we go any further, I want to bring up a couple of the other systems that I see people try to build manually and just point you to the right direction to know what's available for you. The first is just camera control systems. If you're building a camera controller for your game and your game's not really custom, it doesn't need a very special controller, start with Cinemachine. Just put that in there. It'll probably handle exactly what you need and probably do a lot more than you need. It also works great for animating your UI elements and everything else. Is that? Okay,